Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to day 3. You've made it this far, and we appreciate you coming back all the way. Yesterday was crazy. What an amazing day that was. We had a tremendous amount of speakers and the insights that they shared. I had to go home and actually, I was on the computer till late last night trying to journal and word vomit into my computer so that way I didn't lose all the things that were talked about yesterday. I hope that it was as impactful to you as it was to me. On today, not as long of a day as the previous days have been, but it's going to be just as impactful. And here to welcome you for the last day that he's going to do so for this symposium is our president, Kirk Spangenberg.
So, how's everybody doing? Good morning. Good morning. All right, we're still here. So always the last day gets a little slower. Some people got to get traveling and stuff like that, and that's okay. But we still got a good lineup for you. A lot of exciting things to discuss. We happy so far? Yeah, clapping and stuff like that. Y'all haven't clapped for me yet today. Yes. All right, I need it. I need you to tell me I'm doing a good job. Am I doing a good job? Okay. Thank you. I got you. All right, joking aside, so yesterday was fun, and of course we heard a little bit about just go do the thing, go out and run with scissors, move out, draw fire, and so we're doing that. And one of the things I wanted to remind you, of course, is one, join AMCL, right? You got to join, so that's good. And if you want to get further involved, again, come talk to me, come talk to Doug Hughes around here somewhere. We've got lots of opportunities to do stuff, to be content creators, be communicators, to really help local chapters get off the ground at your base, right? Not very hard to do, to be honest with you. So, let us know if you want to be a part of it. We can get you started. But what I want to go ahead and do, and once again, I don't know if we have the QR code. We'll put that up later. But we had it up yesterday. Take the survey, right? Take the survey because it helps us kind of take in what you liked, what your ideas are for making it better, and all those things. So go ahead and take the survey when you get a chance. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the day over to the illustrious Travis Reese once again. Talk to us about Wargaming. Thanks.
All right. I think everybody here now is, returning victim of this whole process, so this is awesome. Again, reintroducing the team, though. Kevin Williamson, working our simulation through Atom Engine Battle Roads product, and then my able assistant here, Kurt Hudson from MITRE, who's also going to be doing some of the analysis for this. Now, to piggyback on what Kurt said, involvement in AMCL. So I came the first time as an attendee, and then there were certain things that we knew that logistics needed to frame and introduce a little bit better to the audience. And so I went to Greg and said, can I do some Wargaming stuff? And we introduced this. And then this is the second iteration of this. We're actually doing a presentation built on a vignette that we built, or a scenario that we built last year, now the refined vignette. So participation in AMCL is about as easy as, I have a thing, it's a talent, it's useful to the community. Would you like to do some of it? So let's go. So that's kind of how we ended up here. The second thing is on the survey too. As we evolve Wargaming, we're seriously considering next year putting together a live game where we get some of the audience to come to participate, and you can sign to be a member or participant. From the survey's perspective, we want to crowdsource ideas for a game. So things that we potentially could execute within a 24, 48-hour period, kind of collate, put potentially an out brief together, and then compose that into a report. And whatever contested logistics challenges are emerging or modern operational challenges, but even more importantly, taking the General Berger theme, what don't your maneuver counterparts know about logistics that they need to see in the function of a game, where maneuver is the thing that happens, but logistics is the pacing activity and structure behind that. We're ready to design this kind of thing, and they've been long in waiting. To that end, too, we've taken you first on creation of a scenario so that you had a handrail to kind of go through the discussions for whatever the theme was for the day, day-to-day campaigning, moving into crisis. Today is going to be armed conflict, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But we also want to talk to you about the structures of games. Like, how do you look at this and think to yourself, okay, what am I interpreting or seeing here? So first and foremost, like without going through the formal, U.S. defense process for how a defense planning scenario becomes a executable joint scenario that then can be put into a game, the overall point of this is that a game, and particularly one that's built around a scenario like this, is designed to be plausible, so it has to be something we think could be achieved. So in this context, we did something that's unclass. If you think it wasn't informed also by other classified work or analysis that's going on right now, like that would not be an accurate appreciation. Like, this is plausible, we just put it in a space that is not necessarily compromisable, from those classification layers. The other part of that too is, games are, present not only plausible scenarios, but they present problems to be solved and not solved problems. So you're not structuring a hard analysis, you're doing, you're doing the discovery, and then as we produce the analysis on the back end, like, okay, what did we kind of learn from this? Was it meeting even our original objectives, what we designed the game to do? Did it like transform itself over time as we discovered new things? Then the last piece to that is we've been talking a lot at this particular event about, the use of data, data analytics, data literacy generally. What does it mean to understand that? The ways that data is incorporated and presented, that quantitative stuff. And then gaming, typically the qualitative stuff. And you use both of them in sort of a net assessment process that you didn't even realize you were doing, which is I'm playing and immersing myself in this scenario, but the only way I'm able to play effectively is I have some kind of data or constraint or organization that I work against in order to make this, again, plausible in terms of the outcomes. Now, quantitatively, of course, you know that, hey, you can't be a one and done because each experience is different per the audience, the adjudication, some of the choices you make. So you got to play a few of them until you start to normalize what some of the reactions may be, and accounting for bias or heuristic as well. Hey, what did you lead yourselves into thinking? And so every game actually not only has to be analyzed, but it's got to be red teamed too. What did we do right? What did we do wrong? But more importantly, what did we introduce as a bias that we need to expunge because it's not helping us get over this next level of understanding? That's a very, very, very complicated set of skills to mature and develop. And oftentimes, the best way to do it is just play the games until you start to see the habits of mind that you're like, oh, this is how we need to erase this, reverse it, or improve it. And certainly getting your maneuver counterparts to participate in a logistics game as an audience watching their logisticians maneuver will be kind of interesting too and educational for them. The thing that they thought was magic ain't, and the things that you guys are going through that have been excluded will probably mature some of your processes as a community. I'll put that part out there. So now what you're going to see and interpret. So let's go through the immersion portion of this. Let's talk about today's scenario. So for Marine Corps naval logisticians, this vignette involves the challenge of sustainment and distribution from an operational level logistics capabilities to those tactical logistics elements in order to enable a persistent lethal combat operation and avoid culmination in protracted conflict. Key challenges at this phase are twofold. One, we're going to keep supplies and services in motion, and the second thing is we've got to address the fact that units will not have large storage capacity, but will operate from easily depleted on-hand mobile means that will require frequent resupply. So if you think about the way that an EAB is structured and how a stand-in force is working, which we're dealing with the naval and maritime logistics problem sets, you're supposed to be quick, low observable, move quickly, and not have a lot of on-hand. So there's going to generate a frequency. So what do we keep seeing manifested here is the transportation dilemma as part of the physical component to that. And what we keep discovering too is inter-theater, okay, has its own challenges, big ships and big airplanes, but intra-theater and the mobility that logisticians are going to need is huge. And it's not always available in the quantities of traditional assets we've got, CH-53Ks, C-130s. We'll get some better measurement on this one. And so we've actually had the opportunity to present some alternative technology capabilities, which, getting back, by the way, to the experimentation discussion and then eventually how you move that into acquisition, is the fact that we're talking about capabilities that don't fit the norm of what we've used for hundreds of years, tens of years. And so now we have to prime even the experimentation and acquisition community to go, okay, how do we acquire this thing if they're normally aligned to an air domain and a sea domain and something like that, and there's something in between? So watch how this matures in the process of this game as we show the potentials, but also the ways that organizations that achieve this need to think differently about it and help us design an experiment. All right, from the adversary's perspective, we have now moved into armed conflict. They're forcing a unification with Taiwan. This Southern Theater, which is an economy of force, CJTF SPR, their job is to keep the door open. So as ALOCs and SLOCs are being challenged by the PRC in this particular scenario, particularly the Strait of Malacca, and we're trying to bring in from Diego Garcia that maritime prepositioning force and potentially some of that air movement that would transfer from transition from Diego into this theater, think bombers, other types of lethal capabilities, that air defense and sea and maritime control has to be achieved. And so we're going to show you the positions that they're going to be in. And again, we're re-emphasizing that not only are our logistics operations and to set the theater challenge conditioned on the relationships with each individual country that is not in an alliance. Now we're in these armed conflict operations where we're trying to maintain the safety of the things that we need in cooperation with our allies and partners, and we're trying to execute lethal operations and or support theirs now that they're subject to some kind of attack or assault by the adversary, in this case, the PRC. Pausing. The overall goal in this is to show that as nations elect to work more closely with the U.S. and AUKUS allies to counter PRC armed conflict actions that threaten everyone in the region, that's the plausibility of this scenario, access-based and overflight for U.S. and allied nations will increase, but still with caveats. The inability to surge all necessary material into theater, primarily class 3, 5, 7, 8, and 9, so fuels, weapons, end items, medical supplies, spare parts, to meet the demand for follow-on sustainment, maintenance, casualty evacuation, and distribution, still leaves the force vulnerable to logistical combination in the opening phases of armed conflict. The essence of this challenge is to continue to close the delta between the initial limitations of setting the theater based on host nation restraints or limited infrastructure with sufficient supply, maintenance, and transportation to support the naval force. The leveraging of last-minute access to regional locations for prepositioning operations and industrial-based support must transition to persistent operations in order to sustain armed conflict actions and an area of operation that we, as our example case here is, 4,500 miles east to west, 1,300 miles north to south. A lot of space. Okay, let me check my notes real quick, so I don't miss a key element to this. By the way, when you think about issues relative to local sustainment and access to contracts, and one of the caveats for this particular theater is, as we work the plausibility, it may be less subject to lethal challenges. It still may have some of its supply lines open and access. So we may be able to forage class 1 and 3 and focus on some other attributes. Are we making plausible assumptions here? Are they things that we can work with so that we don't clearly move into presumption, but this is testable? All right. We're going to also examine, of course, the integration with the Joint Logistics Enterprise. You know, there's a huge dependency still in that intra-theater relationship, so there's no way that the naval force is not going to be connected to that, let alone our own tactical level sustainment, let alone the naval combat logistics forces afloat, too, that are providing those capabilities. All right, and let me round out really quickly. And as Kevin will demonstrate a little bit later about the plausible disposition of the force, but it's still, in our particular case, supporting host nations and their regions and still observing our right to self-defense and to maintain that movement for that larger Taiwan challenge. I'll round out with this. The focus of this game is to provide the maximum amount of sustainment and maintenance capability as feasible at logistical nodes identified in the scenario as part of the prepositioning for critical supplies needed for protracted armed conflict. So remember, we were limited to 2 establishing nodes, one in Singapore and one in Manus Island, Papua New Guinea, and now we're starting to set up some of our tactical locations and hopefully improve the cycle time in association with EABs and their ability to be supported, but we're still sort of stuck with these larger operational and logistical nodes, constrained to that as well. That's our land space we've got to work with. Okay. Done with scene setting. You've got to appreciate for how the game's going to play. I'm going to turn it over to Kevin. He's also going to do a little bit of a technical demonstration too to see some of the things that you can do to design some experiments using war games as the way to commence that function.
So good morning, everyone. So today, some things stayed the same, some things changed. So by now you're all familiar with the vignette, hopefully. The things that are important to note for today is a lot of the movements have stayed the same, I'll orient top to bottom. So for mainland China, things that are different today is they have now surged aircraft out of mainland China and they're heading south on defensive and offensive caps. We will see more red vessels start heading west to support the tests that they're doing down here with freedom of navigation. Our vessels, along with the abstracted Indonesians, regional partner, are still performing the sea control. And then alternatively, we also have aircraft surging out. So the green forces are still local security forces, region partners, non-program of record capabilities. So Leviathan Nautical Airlift is still doing basically sustainment, just east to west still. And then this one is actually going to go supply the EAB positions. So the difference with the EAB positions today are these are actually the Canis LMVs. They're about a company minus formation. And so what you'll see here is they'll start hopping around from island to island. And that's true for all of the EABs. So when Travis mentions wargaming and experimentation, this is a way that you can do it. So instead of the Force Design 2030, which we already know they have the vehicles, they have the Mattis systems, if you wanted to test what if they had the Canis LMV or what if they had a different prototype, this is kind of a way that you could do that. And then we have more vessels going to secure the EAB positions. Sustainment's still happening. And then we still have stuff coming from Diego Garcia to Darwin. And so I'm gonna go ahead and hit play so you can see this all play out. So we've got the fighters going to their positions. Leviathan Air is starting to move out. Speed it up. So now we're in a shooting war. Some kinetics are happening. Sustainment's going on. And the LMV, the EABs are starting to move to separate island positions. So, when Travis talks about the survey for next year, we would like to get a more engaging war game happening where maybe, the audience sets the conditions where, day one might just be a seminar discussion where you all represent a different regional partner. And then day two, those effects will feed into that. So if you have an idea on how we could do this better, please take the survey or come up and talk to us. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kurt.
Good morning. With this being the third day and the lead-in that we had this morning, I'm stuck on the horns of the dilemma. I was going to do an old story to start off with. I went to this Army school one time where this individual walked out and said, look to your left, look to your right. In X number of days, 70% of you or more will not be here. And I was like, did I really want to come to this school? So those of you that have stuck it out with us, we don't have trophies, but we do have gratitude for your endurance, resilience, and positive attitude. I've had too many great discussions, going back to Brandon's comments on the journaling. I used to write on my hands, and my wife cured me of that, thankfully, because, you run out of arm room. So I want to spend a few minutes about game design in the larger whole of experimentation inside DoD before I get into hectoring you with questions and no answers. Professional wargaming inside DoD has lots of pathways and opportunities to move into that space if you're interested in it. If you want to do some light reading that's really informative, I would start with a book called The Art of Wargaming by Peter Perla and crew. If you've ever gamed with the Naval War College or the Naval Postgraduate School, you've heard of him. He redefined naval experimentation in wargaming in the late 70s and just passed away last December. The other one is called The Craft of Wargaming, which I carry around with me kind of like my professional Bible. It's a very detailed tome on what we're going to talk about for a few minutes today, how to design an experiment that uses wargames, models, and sims as tools to achieve your experiment's objectives, what your organization wants to learn or get out of the experiment. There's a process that designers follow that's deliberate. It's 5 steps. It's distributed over time. Parts of it can be done virtually. Some really do require in person. And depending on how much time your organization has available to prepare for experiments can be done in as little as 6 weeks, recommended about 16 weeks. For big experiments at higher echelons, you really need 6 to 9 months to prepare. But, and it can use a combination of bespoke tools and commercial off-the-shelf tools. I've got a number of examples of commercial off-the-shelf games to give you some ideas of what's possible. I want to focus in really quickly, though, on the key part of the design process. It's called the Measurement Space Workshop. Haven't even discussed a scenario yet, haven't discussed forces available. I've talked to the experimentation sponsor and said, what's the purpose of your experiment? What do you think you'd like to get out of it? Call those objectives, the things they want to learn. The Measurement Space Workshop is where we begin to define the military problem to be solved, the big questions that need to be asked, because they might help us learn and inform those objectives. As Travis said, we're looking for discovery learning. We're not trying to start with solutions to solve the problem in the game, right? You're just trying to make sure you've identified the problem to be solved. So in this Measurement Space Workshop, you begin to put together the framework of the scenario, forces available, geography, potential duration of the game. How long does the game need to be? 24 hours, 72 hours, 6 months, 2 years. Really impacts game design and what models, simulations, and games might be available, right? And gets into who do we need? Do we need red, white, blue, green? If we need those, what are some of the roles available inside of those larger player roles? What types of players then would we need to provide us subject matter or technical expertise inside of those functional roles? And you go through that Measurement Space Workshop. What I'll tell you from experience is you've got a frame around the experimentation objectives with some things informing it. Travis alluded to it, that initial start point of a scenario, forces available, geography, and time are your initial data, right? They'll inform some of your questions and help you look at the problem. So as you go through that process, that Measurement Space Workshop is where you begin to get to the outputs that Travis and Kevin and I have demonstrated over the course of the week. If it's an analytical game, meaning you want to test ideas and potentially get some quantifiable data from specific things in the game, like the program of record and non-program of record things we had in our demo, you're looking at it in this phase as well. It's all rolled up into Peter Perla's cycle of research. That's the only reason I recommend The Art of Wargaming. You can read about that in about 5 pages, right? So you don't have to sleep with it under your pillow. You can actually read it. So when you think through that, the last thing I'll conclude with on the design part is you want to test your game multiple times before you put it in front of potential players. The alpha test is the core design team because they know what they're putting on the table is probably broken right now. We're building the engine. The next one is the beta test, a little bit further down the road. Now I expect the game to work, and I want to see if I'm answering questions to defining the problem, right? And then blind play test. That's where I bring in potential players, let them play the game, and see where we're at. And then I've got to go back and do a final rehearsal, right? You remember that old performance, prior planning and performance, that old saying? It may still be around, it may not. That's why you do that. And it's like an operation in my mind. I try to put it into my personal experiential context. When I prepared for operations, we rehearsed. You want to take the hit in training before you get hit on the field in the game, right? So when your eyes water and they cross, you know what's coming the next time. Maybe your eyes don't water so much, right? So don't forget, it's a process. We work in process-oriented organizations so that we can do routine things routinely and then focus on the important things. And add priority to that task. So with that, I'll dive into the scenario very briefly because I'm not going to make kinetic sounds. I'm not going to make laser sounds. I know you're all thinking it, but I'm not going to do it. Yeah. Key here is avoid logistics culmination and sustain the force to avoid protraction. Big words, lofty goals, especially against a tough enemy. So what do you want to think about? Integration with maneuver. Maneuver does not occur without sustainment. Joint and combined operations, we've hit on it all week. It gets into a new level of complexity in large-scale operations. You'll still find more gaps in those tasks, and you'll be figuring out how to solve and fill those gaps in contact. I will tell you, though, that the Marine Corps doctrine especially really lays out challenges, components, and potential solutions. So if you go back and re-blue yourself on the doctrine, there's a lot of good ideas in there to help you anticipate those gaps. Interoperability, integrated command and control, multinational sustainment. Who can help somebody else with a potential supply chain distribution management problem, right? Understand the constraints and limitations, though, in doing that. And it's not just physical, like my bullets won't go in your weapon, right? It could be something as simple as, I gave the Class 8 example the other day. The U.S. won't accept, not American blood in our operations. That may create big problems in the future in large-scale combat operations where we don't lose 3 to 12 soldiers or service members a day, but we lose battalions, right? I'm not sure lining up all the available soldiers at a sustainment node and drawing blood is going to help with that challenge. I don't know. Something to think about. And then we haven't talked a lot about the domains, but here's where I would offer you, if you don't have a PACE plan for each domain and how you intend to maintain situational awareness, you may have trouble managing data. Data overload is mentioned multiple times in all the Marine Corps references. Paralysis by analysis, you miss decisions because you're too busy analyzing all the data and not focusing on the data that informs your decisions, right? Easy way to get overloaded. I need to know everything. I'm the commander. I'm responsible for everything. Why shouldn't I know everything? I've heard that said before. Really? What's the chain of command for, right? Especially our non-commissioned officers. So, didn't ask a lot of those questions today. I gave you a brief framework, but I wanted to spend more time on the design piece because we've asked you in the surveys for next year to give us input on a future game. And just for the burning question in your mind, there will be lots of fire and sharks with laser beams on their foreheads in the game we bring here next year. So don't put that in the survey.
All right. With that, and I appreciate the analysis, a little bit of feedback, but in the time remaining, we've actually had a little bit of an opportunity to engage with some members of the audience who've kind of critically examined what we're looking at and thinking about it consequentially. So, Paul, you've had some salient comments, and if you would, share those with some of the group too about what you're thinking about, because I think it's really, beneficial for how to, think from a logistics perspective about what they're seeing here.
Sure. So part of the conversation I've had with both Kurt and Travis is sort of how we start to think about war game design. So there's two types of war games. Ones that we do ourselves where we're trying to learn and understand what we're doing, but also the types of games where we are contributing to, say, things like the globally integrated war games, so the chairman's war game, where we are supporting the warfighter in the maneuver piece. In both of these examples, what we need to do is we need to identify, at least as a bare minimum, a concept of support that we are articulating to the warfighters, or indeed to those that are participating in the logistics war game itself, so they understand what the supported relationship is, right? So when you look at this map, this overlay, who is the dependency? Who is their next up the chain that is providing the support? Where are the operational support areas and strategic support areas? It doesn't need to be in infinite detail, but you need to have that framework there to characterize or provide context to the environment that you're operating in. We spend 98% of our time doing a very, very rich and detailed picture about what the bad guys are doing and how we're going to defeat them in detail. and then we don't worry about the purpose, method, end state, mission statement, groupings, and tasks. I'm not advocating that you need a 73-page order with an annex queue, but you need as an absolute minimum a concept of support. And if you don't have it, you're not going to be able to engage with the warfighters or the others in the room in a meaningful way. The other thing is to think about, we say logistics, right? We say logistics, support, sustainment. We use the terms interchangeably. They're not. They mean different things. And indeed, even when you talk about logistics, for example, it is not a uniform distribution. It's like saying maneuver, dropping the mic and walking out. Do you mean by air, by sea, by land? So there is nuance, right? Much in the same way as logistics, there is nuance. So are we talking fuel, ammunition, distribution, warehousing, maintenance, per services, health support? So when you're thinking about these things, so the term mission thread has become a little bit popular at the strategic, particularly in the J7. For lack of a better term, let's say logistics mission threads. So have a think about how you would describe what it is that you do to the other logisticians in the room, but also to those that are not logisticians in the terms of a mission thread. It provides a context for our engagement, for our analysis, and it allows us to identify where there may be friction points in those mission threads for experimentation. I use the example of joint fires as being a very good one in how they understand that very, very well. So they go through a repeatable process time and time and time and time again in both service, joint and combined environments. They identify where things are slowing them down. They will box that. They will go and do an experiment. They will identify potential solutions, and they'll feed it back into the mission thread, and then they'll run it again. We, as logisticians, need to be able to do that, because if we can't, we are never going to address some of the problems that we've highlighted over the last 2 days. Thanks, Travis.
Certainly with that, I think that, Brandon, time to roll out, set up the situation. You got one more comment.
Close on that really
Pardon me?
quick? You want to close on that really quick?
Yes. So one of the things I really enjoy about that last comment too, you know, watching Paul's evolution is he's been interacting with us throughout the entire process. Like, hey, you just hit me in the face with an experiment. Now I've had time to digest it. Here's some of the recommendations and designs. And even when you think about the fact that you use a term like mission threads, can you use wargaming as a part of a mission engineering approach, then to shape, you know, mission threads and then mission engineering threads if you really want to even go into the design or construction of a thing. And it's totally plausible to do. All the different ways you can explore that. We say this to say thanks again for your time and attention. We appreciate the opportunity to be able to use this as a way to engage you in the problem we're going to have, but also as a way to then create future opportunities for logisticians to really get engaged in that, you know, exercise design and experimentation. It's going to be awesome. We're here and available for questions until everybody departs, and certainly from the surveys, ready for your feedback. And thanks again. Enjoy.